The German Chancellor and his governing coalition seem to be in trouble again. This time it's about a planned comprehensive pension reform, and there's a lot of blowback, especially from eastern states. There is so much to unpack about this story, and of course the stakes are very high for the Chancellor himself. If you stick with us, you will learn a lot. You will learn something about the German pension system itself and why it's in trouble. Also, how different the realities still are of people living in the eastern part of the country and the western part of the country 36 years after reunification. And of course, how much of a danger this is to the Chancellor himself and his governing coalition between the center-right, CDU, Christian Democrats, the Christian Social Union, also center-right, and the Social Democrats, which obviously are center-left. And with me today are Veronika Grimm, which is a big deal. We've been trying to talk to Veronika Grimm for a long time, so it's great that she's here today. And I understand it's because of the weather, because her hiking plans were delayed, so that's great that she's here today. She's one of Germany's leading economic experts and also on the German Council of Economic Experts. So she helps political institutions, including the government, to make informed decisions. And here in the studio with us today is our very own chief political editor, Michaela Küfner. And Michaela and I are going to try to bring you up to speed very quickly about what's happening. In case you haven't, been following intimately the German pension system, which would be completely understandable. So what happened? At the end of June, a council of experts that had been working on those proposals for about 5 months presented their proposals for a comprehensive pension reform plan. One of the hardest things to do in Germany. And then a miracle happened, right, Michaela?
Yes, it did. This is a bit like open heart surgery on the political soul of Germany. The pension is the fundamental social promise to anyone who lives and works in Germany. And for decades, governments have tried to find compromise, and tada, it's a bit like walking on water, parting the sea. Pick your analog image there. It can be biblical. There was a compromise, 33 proposals on the table, including scrapping getting a pension early from the age of 63 if you've worked for 45 consecutive years. And this particular element is now being debated again.
Right. And part of that miracle was that the governing coalition climbed behind it and said, yes, we're behind this. So the center-right CDU, the Chancellor's own party, and the Social Democrats were farther to the left, and that was not really to be expected. You mentioned one of the key points of those that reform. The other two are, or let me just sum it up for you so you know what we're talking about here. The main points were linking retirement age to life expectancy, so most likely upping it, elevating it. And the second one is having a capital-funded pillar like other countries. That was very hard fought in Germany, but yes, that's part of it too. And phasing out certain deduction-free early retirement options, as Michaela just described, after long contribution periods. And that is the point of contention here. Veronika Grimm, what did you think of this proposal when you heard it first?
Yeah, I think it's a very important proposal. It points in the right direction. So there is the linkage to the life expectancy. So the retirement age will increase stepwise as life expectancy is growing. There is this restriction on early retirement, which is, I think, important but very debated, which we observe right now. And there are also other components. A mandatory capital funded pension pillar is an important issue, I think. But this, of course, leads to a double burden on the young generation, because it will raise contributions in the short term, in order to be for a more sustainable system in the longer term. So this is, of course, a little bit dampening growth. potential because there are higher contributions in the short term. And then there is a debate on a broader contribution base. So it's discussed whether self-employed people also are forced into the pay-as-you-go system, which is a thing that you can debate. But in a broader sense, the reform points in the right direction. But on the other hand, at the very beginning of the German of their coalition, this coalition took some decisions to increase pensions, which is pointing in the wrong direction. So I think overall, I think more has to be done. But this is a first step.
So you sound a bit underwhelmed. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it is not particularly a German issue, but you see also in other European countries that adaptations of the pension system to make it more sustainable are very hard to get politically done. For example, in France, Macron tried it, and it had been reversed afterwards as well. So I think this is really a hard political issue, but it has to be tackled because in the long run, the systems are all not sustainable given the demographic developments. We have low birth rates. A lot of countries have pay-as-you-go systems, which are not very well compatible with low birth rates because current working people pay for the pensioners. And if there's less and less workforce, of course, this is a big challenge.
The German Chancellor himself, after this proposal was presented, had this to say. Let's take a listen.
In yesterday's coalition committee, we agreed to implement the 33 proposals made by the Pension Commission. This is the second major reform following the healthcare reform, the public health insurance reform, which we intend to finalise and set in motion before the summer recess. We can be proud of this undertaking. These reforms create security. They guarantee the continued existence of our social welfare state, not just for the current legislative term, but for generations to come.
Michaela, Veronika Grimm mentioned some of the reasons why this current system isn't working anymore. Why didn't politicians do something earlier?
Well, it's not that they didn't have the advice, and I do admire the patience of Veronika Grimm to time and time again explain. We have these annual press conferences as well where you deliver your findings, and that every single time you've been warning that something must be done, it must be done fast, and it must be dramatic. Now, there is a huge pension deficit. 128 billion euros annually come out of the German budget, which is around about 500 billion, to prop up the current pension system, which is not just a pension system. It's a promise to society that Germany is the place to be, that there is a guarantee of stability here in Germany. And Friedrich Merz has to live up to that, and he has to deliver very fast on his very drastic reform promises that he's made. He mentioned the health reform. Part of that has been launched already as well. So this is very critical for him.
Why is it so hard in Germany to do that?
Because everybody agrees that something must be done, but they don't. It's a bit of not in my front yard, backyard kind of scenario,
right.
But nobody wants to suffer the actual cuts. And interestingly, we also saw polling as these 33 proposals came out, with only about a third of Germans believing that this will go a long way and actually secure the German pension system, and just over half of Germans not really believing that this will be successful. And particularly that element of being able to get your pension early if you've paid in for such a long time is hugely unpopular. More than 2/3 of Germans rejected it. So this is a kind of catch-22 situation, recognition, broad consensus that something must be done, it must be done fast, but then this very cherished idea of getting the stability and security through a state pension is something that many don't want to see touched at the same time.
And Veronika Grimm, we've mentioned it. The discussion right now is centering on that possibility that people still have to retire early if they contributed 45 years to the system, and I think if they're at least 63 years old. Would it be so bad just to take that out of the whole package and say this is fair? We'll just leave it in there. Would that really be a problem?
I think it will, of course, make the reform much less effective. It is very important that we increase the pension age. And of course, this is something that goes in the wrong direction. And it has been established, as at least the narrative was, that it is for the rather low-income, hard-working people, but in the data you see that these are not the people that take advantage of it. So it's very often people that work as a bureaucrat or something that use this early retirement scheme. And of course, this is basically not what it was created for. So I think this is, of course, a stretch. And one of the problems is, of course, that in the good times that we went through after the wall has been falling, we decreased the defense budget. And there were a lot of promises and social security measures that had been introduced, basically also for political reasons, in order to keep coalitions together and keep them working. So all these additions to the pension scheme have been introduced in the years where there was a lot of flexibility in the federal budget. But this situation is, of course, gone. So now defense spending has to increase. The room to maneuver for the state is decreasing. There is a lot of debt space that has been created in order to circumvent this pressure. And of course, this is not a sustainable solution. And something has to be done rather quickly. We also calculated the total payroll-based contributions that would have to be paid by future generations. And if you look at people born in the year 2000, what they would pay as social contributions on average throughout their life, it is 50% of gross wages as compared to 42% at the moment. Someone who is born 2010 would, if we do not adapt the system, pay total payroll-based social contributions of 55% as compared to 42% at the moment. And of course, this is a situation in which we cannot proceed. So something has to be done. This is quite obvious if you look at the numbers, and I think it's very difficult to think of other numbers because birth rates cannot be reversed that easily, and most of the people that are affected are already born. So the situation is more or less there to analyze, but politically, of course, it's very difficult to move.
The whole pension debate is political currency, and it has been a political punching ball for decades now. It was a social democrat, Franz Müntefering, in the cabinet of Angela Merkel, who in 2006, as Labour and Social Affairs Minister, pointed out that it's simple maths of the basic school in Saarland, that was the exact quote, to actually look into the future and see that this system cannot withstand.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, the demographics, yes. Because, these birth rates and the boomers' birth rates didn't come as a surprise. It was clear back then. And he was the one, so it was a social democrat. I think it's really worth remembering that, because the social democrats are the ones who didn't want to let go of this, of what's now being debated again, that you can already be of pensionable age at 63 if you've worked for 45 years already. But it was the social democrats who raised the alarms very loudly. And it was the past government led by a social democrat, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who said that defense spending against social spending, who actually made that an election campaign issue in the last elections. And it didn't work for him, where he said, look, I don't want to weigh up weapons against Ukraine, against social security here in Germany. So here we are, and then coming back to that miracle, with participation of a lefty within the Social Democrats, Annika Klose, that commission came up with a compromise. It had been fought over behind closed doors, which is a miracle in itself that nothing came out. And now we're at a moment that is critical for Friedrich Merz, that this hard-fought compromise is being potentially torn apart again, which would be a complete disaster for the stability of this government.
And if you look at who's for and against this proposal, you have new voices chiming in almost every day. But the broader picture, I think, is safe to say, is that there's blowback, especially from the eastern states, from the heads of government of those eastern states.
But conservative,
from both,
CDU, from Friedrich Merz's party, they started this.
They got the ball rolling, but now, of course, you also have other people from the Social Democrats chiming in there. And this brings me to a question to you, Veronika Grimm. Why is there so much blowback from the East? Are people in the East so much, to put it very simply, so much poorer than people in the West?
Yeah, I think there are definitely economic differences between East and West Germany in terms of productivity, wealth, and demographics. And I think there are two components to this critique by the CDU prime ministers in Eastern Germany. They have elections in front of the door. I think that's a very important issue, why they come up with it now. And they point to the very particular Eastern German situation. So in Eastern Germany, some developments are more rapidly evolving. So there's a rapid population aging, also because many young people left Eastern Germany. So there is a shrinking workforce. There are a little bit lower wages and productivity, but they have higher growth. And I think most importantly, they have more limited private wealth and more limited capital-funded pensions complementary to the regular pension system.
So the blowback is justified to a certain extent here, right?
The argument is that there is a stronger dependence on public pensions.
Okay.
In a way, that's understandable from these two perspectives that they put that into the discussion. Once the elections in the East, and second, the stronger dependence on public pensions by the Eastern Germans, which are, of course, their voters. On the other hand, of course, in order to get to an agreement now in the coalition between CDU and SPD, that's a very challenging situation because, of course, Social Democrats now jump on this. And also question whether the pension system reform should be proceeded as proposed. And this, of course, is a real challenge for the Merz government.
And it's also part of the story of the rise of the AfD, especially in the East, right, Michaela?
Well, I mean, certainly it's an issue that is easy for the AfD to exploit. And I just want to remind us that we're all, of course, waiting with bated breath for those elections in Saxony-Anhalt, which are taking place on the 6th of September. And the state premier of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, Manuela Schwesig, from the Social Democrats, who faces elections on the 20th of September, also facing off a rising AfD, keeps citing the figure of 75% of East Germans who rely on that state pension. And I just want to throw in those figures because you mentioned them. The average wealth in West Germany is around almost 400,000 euros that people have in the bank or in terms of assets. In the East, it's only 170,000. And inheritances in the West are above 90,000, and whereas in the East, they're about 50,000. So it's almost like there's
half.
Yeah, almost half. So people are a lot more sensitive to any kind of cuts to this promise of financial security. And that's what makes this such a politicized issue. But what really took Friedrich Merz by surprise is that it was his own. It was the conservative state premiers in the East who spoke up and who clearly are putting this on the table. And they really need a win, because their argument is we are the ones who are fighting at the front to keep the far-right Alternative for Germany out of power. But Friedrich Merz is in a position where he can't afford to take a hit either, because he's just had this conundrum over his cabinet reshuffle, and he's seen as weakened at the federal level, and he has a lot more reforms that he needs to tackle and get through. So he cannot afford for this to unravel.
Maybe to remind everybody, the far-right AfD is polling at 41% in Saxony-Anhalt, which is the first state that will have elections on the 6th of September, so not far away. Veronika Grimm, since you're an expert on all of this, isn't there some kind of way of, having more fairness between East and West when it comes to those pension plans? Some kind of idea that's not really part of the mix yet. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to do this in the statutory pension system itself. I think it is very important to promote economic development in both East and Germany. So the whole country at the moment isn't going in the right trajectory when it comes to growth, productivity, and so on. And of course, this would be the key, but this is a medium, long-term issue. You cannot push that and in the same year, so growth is becoming dynamic and solving all the problems. But this is what the government would have to do, is to promote structural reforms that promote growth and productivity in Germany, East and West again. But this is no short-term plan. In the pension system, I think it's very difficult to solve. I mean, there is a social security system that really looks at the individual, the situation of the individual person in the context of his family, his or her family, and ensures that there is a network, a social security network. But in the pension system, of course, this is an insurance system where you have contributions for your whole working life, and then you get something out of it. And to tweak this in order to also ensure that the very low-income people all get a high enough pension, this is very costly. I think we have to think about the social security system that really looks at the real social needs of people in the context of their family. To do this in the pension system, I think, would just be too expensive, because you would undermine in a way the pension insurance system in order to get everyone a high enough pension. I think this is something that cannot be done, but this is, of course, always in the discussion that pensions are too low and you should increase pensions for everyone, which I think is not a thing that you really can do in a pay-as-you-go system.
And what the government just guaranteed until 2031 is that the pensions will remain at the current level of 48%, minimum 48% of the average wage.
Which is not extremely high if you compare it to other European countries.
At the same time, there is also a ceiling on pension contributions. So very high incomes don't pay proportionately more.
Let's take a look now at what the cost is of this discussion, of this blowback to the governing coalition, to the Chancellor. You mentioned it, Michaela, and I think that's you really have to wrap your head around this, that the blowback was started by heads of government of 3 Eastern states that are part of the same party as the German chancellor right there. Normally, you would have expected the Social Democrats to start something like that, a revolt like that, because it's kind of in their DNA. And I brought a soundbite because it's so interesting. One of the party chairs of the SPD, when this discussion started, initiated by the CDU, the Christian Democrats, Bärbel Baas, who's one of the co-chairs of the SPD, had a long interview. It's called the Summer Interview here in Germany. And she said this about the discussion within the CDU.
As for the Conservatives suddenly wanting to reopen the package, the SPD certainly wouldn't object if that were the Conservatives' position. But I don't see that happening yet. I believe the Eastern CDU state premiers need to clarify with the CDU-CSU parliamentary group whether they want to keep it. The SPD certainly won't stand in the way.
So basically, Bärbel Baas, who we just saw, is saying, come on, CDU, get your act together on this, right, Michaela?
Absolutely, she is. And she's unusually restrained. She's also the Labour and Social Affairs Minister. And only a couple of months ago, she was actually at a trade union meeting where she made sure to make clear that there's a huge distance between the agreed policy with Friedrich Merz's coalition under his lead and her own political opinions when it comes to the 8-hour day. So she's one who in the past has been happy to reignite old flames of disagreement. And here, the Social Democrats were remarkably silent. They kept the coalition line. They stuck to what was agreed in this pension commission. And that's upside down world. But then again, we just established that it's a very different reality, particularly in the East, and that particularly in Saxony-Anhalt, Sven Schulze, who is the current CDU Conservative State Premier and who is fighting for his political life against the rise of the far-right Alternative for Germany, which could actually clinch a majority, not in overall votes, but in parliament if certain parties don't make it. That's the mathematics of it. So this is a remarkable weakening of the Chancellor's attempts to have actually this milestone that he can rightly then claim as work he got done on the whole pension, because they need this particular win. And I really lack the imagination how Friedrich Merz can completely not grant them any ground on this. What could be a potential option is to say, look, we will get to that point that we no longer allow pension at 63, but there will be a 5-year period, a transition period. We're getting more and more voices coming up with that. But remarkable radio silence from Annika Klose, the woman who negotiated this within the pension commission. Everybody's on holiday, but politicians do tend to give sound bites when they're on holiday. A complete radio silence there because she's from the left corner of the party and she clearly does not want to go on the record on this particular issue, because the Social Democrats do not want to be seen as the ones again who weaken this so-called grand coalition, which already is a marriage of political necessity here in Germany, simply because Friedrich Merz had nobody else he could go into a coalition with.
Veronika Grimm, you have to leave soon, but I would like to get as much information from you as I can before you leave. And we just heard from Michaela, politically there might be some wiggle room here. How important is it from an economic standpoint here to not touch this package and to not start negotiating parts of it?
I think it's important that the government puts forward reforms. And this is an important part of it. I think there is, of course, a certain necessity that Eastern politicians now put this on the table. There are the elections, and you see that all the Eastern politicians speak out on it. On the other hand, there is this issue of stability of the government, and the Social Democrats are well aware that they have to stay in the game with respect to these reforms. So there are these different wings in the Social Democrat Party, and certainly the left wing of the Social Democrats doesn't like this reform. But on the other hand, the stability of the government is in danger anyhow. I mean, there are all these developments within the Christian Democrats. And so I think this silence on the federal level is well understandable. And in a way, I think they try to look through all this until the elections are done. That they manage to put forward reforms is very important because the time window is shrinking. They have already not used the first year of their joint government. And of course, as elections coming closer, federal elections coming closer and closer, the time window in order to do something will shrink. And it is not clear that the economic situation stays calm until the next elections. So I think they are really in need to put forward reforms. And this reform is only one part in the puzzle to make the finances, the public finances, more sustainable. There is not done a lot to promote growth yet. And I think growth is a key. Structural reforms to promote growth will make things easier, but of course are not a quick win. So you have to put forward reforms, and then it is not so clear when they will become effective, and growth is really becoming more dynamic again.
How do you before you leave, how do you assess, Veronika Grimm, how do you assess the overall? I mean, is the governing coalition getting enough credit for what it's trying to do, or is, the bad public image it has and all the bashing that's going on, is it justified?
I mean, at the moment, the situation is not positive. So investment in Germany, private investment, which would be needed in order to get growth back, is rather decreasing than increasing. You see that in particular for leading technologies, also R&D investment is not dynamic in Germany. So a lot has to be done. I think what is undervalued in the political discussion right now is the reduction of the regulatory burden. I think not only bureaucracy, but also regulation has to be much more in the focus of politicians, because that's a very cheap way in order to foster growth, just to reduce the regulatory burden on companies so that they can so that their option spaces to act increase. And this is something that the coalition should focus on. Regulatory burden on the one hand with respect to technologies, with respect to high tech, and on the labor market. On the labor market, this will be, of course, a very hard negotiation within the coalition, because the Social Democrats will not like this.
It's a whole can of worms. Thank you very much, Veronika Grimm, for being with us today. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Michaela is going to stick around a bit more. And I saw you, you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to stress that the pension is such an emotive issue, and that when you link economic development with the security of the pension, that already is an expert debate here in Germany. The Social Democrats have very much campaigned on a platform of what the state needs to do for citizens, that is something that people expect as a baseline, that they are shielded from the volatility of economic developments. And if we were sitting in the US, we wouldn't be having this debate at all. It's a completely different system. But there, the pension system relies fully on the so-called 401ks. It is
very different.
It's directly linked to the development of the markets and thereby the economy. And that is not the case here in Germany. A small element of that was just introduced. But that, of course, also shapes the public debate about it. And here the function of the state and the government, but particularly the state, is very much seen as shielding people from development, from negative developments, economic developments, rather than harnessing those for the good of the growth of pension funds, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, as a last kind of assessment here, there's been so much trouble surrounding this coalition ever since it started. Is this what we're seeing right now, business as usual, or is it really a danger to the governing coalition and the Chancellor?
It's not business as usual. It's still a far cry from the complete and utter chaos that we saw the past coalition led by Olaf Scholz descend into, which then broke up. At the same time, this is a very sensitive moment for Friedrich Merz because he made very big promises which were not fulfilled. As Veronika Grimm stressed, the first year went without any of those big reform packages that he had announced would happen very fast. And of course, the economic development is not taking off. A lot of that, granted, has to do with external factors, US tariffs, the Iran war, but not only. And if he doesn't manage to make headway on this reform, if this pension reform, which is actually one for the history books, the compromise in itself is one for the history books, if that unravels, he will lose yet more credibility, particularly at a moment where Friedrich Merz, pretty much from day one, has defined the floor of public popularity ratings that we've so far seen in Germany. He started a lot lower than both of his predecessors, and he kept going even lower. So he really needs a win. Having said that, his counterparts at the East German state level, particularly in Saxony-Anhalt, Sven Schulte, he badly needs a win to avoid another big entry into the German history books, and that would be the far-right Alternative for Germany actually coming to power anywhere in Germany in the first state.
And of course, we will all be following those elections on the state level very closely. We've started, and expect us to talk about it here in one of future episodes of our Berlin Briefing podcast. Of course, thank you for sticking with us. Really appreciate it. And if you have comments, we want those comments. We want your input. Also maybe for topics, so you know what you would like us to talk about. Thank you very much, and see you soon.